In the year of 1954, an African-American gang formed in the Maxwell Street Market area called the Egyptian Cobras, which was on the west side of Chicago. It was said that these Cobras broke away from the Imperial Chaplains gang, and these Cobras were founded by James Cogwell. The Egyptian Cobras were formed to protect the black community.
The phenomenal thing about this area right here is we got Chicanos, we got blacks, mulattoes, we got whites. Of all different, we got all different kinds of races up here, mixed right here in the community. As far as conflict throughout the races, we don't have that.
This was during a time when gang violence was escalating near the west side area, especially in the Maxwell Market area. African-American gangs were mostly non-violent before 1954 and were mostly baseball teams, but some of those teams became more violent in the beginning of 1954.
But we find the community is going down because it looks just like don't nobody care.
We are here. Sorry, folks. Sorry, folks, Cobra killer, nigga. You already know. Why that nigga bust down the alley, nigga? That nigga bust down the alley. Watch out, bend that bitch, Yeah, you got it. Sorry, folks. What's up? Where your snakes at, nigga?
But before we get started, make sure y'all go subscribe to my members only. It's only $2.99 and I post exclusive videos on there. But the name Egyptian Cobra was chosen because of the black Egyptian Cobra snake, which is the most dangerous snake in the world that has venom that can quickly kill. In the year of 1958, the Egyptian Cobras became a large gang in the North Lawndale community. At some point, many Cobras migrated out of the near west side and settled in the K-Town area, which is around North Lawndale, and by 1958, they dominated the streets, contesting with the Clover Street gang. In the year of 1958, a group of African-American youths from the Fuller Park community came together to fight back against the racial issues, which they were dealing with from the mostly white Irish gangs from the neighboring Canaryville neighborhood.
I think it is. I think they try to move all the poor people out the city to the suburbs, man. Bring all the rich people back in. I think hey, that's real, man. I think the wealthy people want the uptown area. They want it back.
This right here is something that you can take a view of right here. Just take a view of this right.
These youths called themselves the Egyptian Cobras, just like the West Side group. Just like the Egyptian Cobras from the West Side, the name was chosen for the same reasons. The youths that formed the South Side Cobras were aware of the West Side Cobra group. The South Side Cobras would become a completely different unlinked organization to the West Side. However, they would have ties that would allow them to hang out together and sometimes engage in the activities together. In the 1950s, the Fuller Park community was transitioning from being a mostly white community into being a mostly African American community, and the racial transitioning was not an easy one, and it was not well documented. Within no time, the Egyptian Cobra spread into the Englewood, Washington Park, Cabrini Green, Douglas, and Grand Boulevard communities. In 1958, the Englewood neighborhood experienced escalating racial tensions and violence as it transitioned from a predominantly white community to a predominantly black one. This shift was accelerated by the poorly planned construction of the Dan Ryan Expressway, which disrupted and displaced communities in Fuller Park, Englewood, and Washington Park, leaving many African Americans with no choice but to move to Englewood. The sudden influx of black residents enraged the local white greaser gangs. However, the focus soon shifted from racial violence to gang violence within the black community. That same year, the Cobras found themselves in a conflict with a newly formed African American gang, the Devil's Disciples, which was later known as the Gangster Disciples / Black Disciples. By the end of 1958, white flight had largely concluded, and the gang rivalry overshadowed the early racial tensions. In Englewood, Leonard Johnson led the Cobras and may have been the co-founder of that chapter. His leadership likely ended when he was imprisoned in December of 1959. In the Grand Boulevard community, Egyptian Cobras moved into the tenant apartments that were known as Black Belt in 1958. The Cobras lived in these neglected buildings in the late 1950s. At 45th and State until the buildings were destroyed in 1960. Even after the buildings were demolished, the Cobras still hung around this area heavily. Legend has it that Joe Bob started the Cobras, or at least the 45th and State branch, in the Grand Boulevard neighborhood. This was the start of a permanent part of the Cobra history, and as decades passed, the Cobras have remained a large part of the community. The Cobras quickly migrated to the Cabrini Green public housing projects in 1958, in the 1150 building to the 1152 buildings, started by Solomon Taylor, aka King, who ran that section of the Cobras and was likely a co-founder. It is also possible the Egyptian Cobras controlled the Cabrini Green buildings too. The Cobras' presence in the Cabrini Green was legendary, as they heavily controlled the gangster disciples over these buildings. Egyptian Cobras had also spread into the Hyde Park neighborhood by the late 50s, and they conquered the east side of Martin Luther King Boulevard around 49th and St. Lawrence. The Hyde Park Cobras did not last well into the 60s and were gone by 1962, and the Devil's Disciples were fierce competitors for Northern Hyde Park, as the Disciples ruled from Woodlawn Ave to Lake Park Ave. But both groups were removed by the early mid-60s because of the neighborhood renewal. In the year of 1962, Cobra members were flipped to Black Pea Stones after the Cobras came to assist a black community in the Greater Grand Crossing. The Cobras once had a large following in the Greater Grand Crossing neighborhood that even famous social workers Freddie Strobeck and James Short discovered in 1959 when they mainly studied female members of the gang called Cobrettes. And on December 8, 1959, Chicago Tribune article reported that the Cobras had invaded the territory of a Southside gang and they were going to fight at the Dan Ryan's Woods. When the fight didn't happen, the Cobras wandered to the north side of the city, to the North Center neighborhood where they played catch with a shotgun at the Riverview Park Festival, scaring the crowd to death. And around this time too, the Egyptian Cobras boosted their numbers, not only in the further South Side settlement, but also of an alliance with another South Side gang called the King Cobras. Both gangs merged their concept to an extent of creating the Egyptian King Cobras in the Englewood or Fuller Park neighborhood. The King Cobras were led by Theotis Clark, aka Imperial D. In the year of 1960, all branches of the Egyptian Cobras went on a violent murder rampage, and on March 8, 1960, 17-year-old Robert Diggs would be barely outnumbered by the Cobras and begin to run near 71st Street overpass, but as he was running from the Cobras, he fell, and the Cobras beat him and stabbed him to death. He would die at the age of 17. It was over 14 Cobra youths involved in this murder. David Johnson, 17 years of age, who was with Diggs right before he died, said that the attack began by the Egyptian Cobras with the cry out, "Yo Yo Egyptians." Johnson said he once was a member of the Egyptian Cobras but quit some time ago. He said that there were about 5,000 members of the gang on the south side. He then said, "I went to one of the meetings at a school playground at 64th Street and Union Avenue, and there was about 50 of them at the meeting, and all they was talking about is other gangs and how they was gonna beat them up." That night, they went out to get another gang called the Noblemen. Johnson said they met up each Wednesday and the leader was Leonard Johnson. He made all the decisions and told the gang what to do and where to go. He said that they had zip guns and knives, which a zip gun was a homemade gun only made to shoot 122 caliber bullet. In 1960, Henry Pounder, aka Johnny Rongo, was only 16 but already proven to be a dangerous leader, as he led groups of the Cobras on a murderous crime spree in Hyde Park between 1960 and 1962. The spree started on November 23, 1960, when Pounder, James Brown, and Jonathan Phillips robbed a tailor shop on 53rd and Woodlawn, beating the 72-year-old shop owner Lester Wolf to death. In March of 1961, the three were said to robbed and killed a cab driver at 51st and Cottage Grove, and when Pounder was arrested in February of 1962, he was already on trial for a murder of Lucas O'Neill, which was a security guard at a laundromat at 61st and Cottage Grove. On August 19, 1961, 4 other members of the Cobras were also apprehended for shooting a man at 54th and University, which he refused to give up his money when he was being robbed. Pounder gathered members from the 49th and St. Lawrence area and Cobras from Hyde Park to carry out these crimes, even though Ponder was from the 51st and State area. After Pounder was convicted of his crimes in 1962, 17-year-old Henry Cogwell, aka Mickey, stepped up to lead the Southside Cobras. It was also 1962 when the Cobras squashed their war with Blackstone Rangers. After Henry Cogwell proposed an alliance idea to Theodis Clark, Clark at first rejected the idea but then reluctantly accepted. The Cobras now became known as the Cobra Stones, which was a name not seen in the news until the late 1960s. The Cabrini Green and Marshfield Cobras all became Cobra Stones. The West Side Cobras would have nothing to do with the Blackstone Rangers or the Cobra Stones name. This further shows you how separated these Cobra groups were. Cogwell's brother, Jerome Cogwell, aka Pony Soldier, was killed on September 7th or 8th of 1968 at 5200 State Street, right outside the entrance of Robert Taylor Homes. The murder was done by the Devil's Disciples. In December of 1968, Jeff Fort led a massive march down State Street, demanding that the street renamed as State Street after Jerome Cogwell. The Stones proceeded to smash windows, cars, and riot all up and down the street. In March of 1976, Jeff Fort, the leader of the Stones, was released from federal prison, and rumors had flown around that Jeff Fort had ordered the death of Mickey Cogwell on February 25th, 1977. On this day, Mickey was walking home at 3:45 in the morning, and a gang member assassin came up from behind him and fired a 9mm pistol in his back. The Cobras then changed their organization's name to Mickey Cobras in his honor. In the late 70s, after Mickey Cogwell's death, the Mickey Cobras lost most of their Robert Taylor Project territory, except for the Hole, and many Cobras north of the 51st converted to Black Disciples. In 1985, Jeff Fort ordered murders of several King Cobras. In April of 1985. According to the case documents, Jeff Fort wanted complete control of the heroin trade. As the 80s progressed, the Mickey Cobras grew in numbers, spreading in many more areas on the south side, plus into some suburbs in the 1990s and 2000s. Mickey Cobras also grew very large in the 1980s, all because of sanctions passed down to the Black P. Stones by the El Rooks. And in 1979, the El Rooks declared that all Stones had dropped their name Black P. Stones, or they would face dire consequences. So many Stones flipped the Mickey Cobras to avoid the sanctions. In the year of 1990s and 2000s, much of the Cobras territory was removed due to the demolishing of Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor's housing project. But as of today, many gang sets have Mickey Cobras in them, and Mickey Cobras are very active throughout Chicago. But that'll be about it for this video. Make sure you like or dislike, comment, and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments what y'all want to see next. And as always, stay blessed and stay well. Yeah, I'm out.